Agendas were posted and furnished to all news media and persons requesting notification.
We have a new board member in Lewis Hay from Wadmalaw. Mr. Hay, would you like to give us a little, 60-second background on yourself?
Well, you can't do 83 years in 60 seconds, but well, I'm living on family land that my grandfather bought in 1900 and sleep in the bedroom I was born in, so that's home, and Charleston County is home, and I was very active in the first Wadmalaw plan back in the 80s, and then subsequently got on the Low Country Land Trust Board for 10 years or so, and then when I got off the board, I started working part-time as staff because they needed somebody old who spoke Low Country to talk to landowners. You couldn't hire a PhD from Purdue to talk to them. Johns Island landowners didn't want to talk to those people. So I got involved that way, and I've been involved ever since, one way or another. And I hope I can help, and I hope I can remember a few things that we did in the past. And glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for being here, and great to have you. Can we have an approval or a motion for approval of the meeting notes from October 22nd?
I'll make that motion, approval of the minutes as presented.
Sorry, minor.
Okay.
I was actually at the meeting. I just add my name.
Okay.
It doesn't recognize me.
Okay.
That's all.
So we need to change it to reflect Christiane was here.
Yep, that's all.
Okay, with that one change, you want to revise?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
With that one update.
We have a second. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Any public comments this morning? No. Okay. Great. So now we have the sometimes awkward business of nomination and election of GAB officers. Currently, I'm the chairman. Andrew's the vice chair. I'm very happy to keep going as is. I did recently retire from my day job, so I have even more time for this. And I'd be happy to continue. But if there are any other thoughts, I welcome them at this point, or any it requires a motion. And if anybody would like to make a change or make a motion,
I think
now's the time.
I'm personally happy with his leadership. How about everybody else?
I'll make motion to approve. To recommend Chairman to Beazer.
Second. Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. And Vice Chair?
Happy to stay on. If someone wants to do it, they can,
I recommend that Andrew continue.
Yeah.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. The motion carries. And thank you for that vote of confidence. It is nice, and it does seem to be a job that you learn a lot more as time goes on. And the subtleties of this whole thing do matter, and it's nice to be gaining confidence in this role. So thank you. Now we have the business of appointing subcommittee members. And the subcommittee would largely stay the same with one exception. We had Nora retire from the GAB recently, which leaves one opening. And I would like to suggest Mr. Alvin Taylor, given his background with DNR and experience in leadership of this kind. It's a straight appointment, right?
Mr. Attorney, that's how I understand it.
No, I believe that is correct.
Yeah.
Chairman appoints. No vote needed.
Chairman appointed. Therefore, I believe we have agreed upon this and it's accepted.
Yes.
Welcome to the subcommittee.
Thank you.
Okay,
right.
Fantastic. We might have to address this again in March. Should I talk about that a little bit or not?
Cat's out of the bag now.
Sure.
Yeah, so
I can, if you like.
will
It's
you
public
address
knowledge.
that one?
Yeah, Jason Kronsberg has accepted a new job with Charleston Parks Conservancy. So he'll be leaving the city, but he will be on through March. So he plans to attend the subcommittee meeting next month, and then we anticipate the city will replace him with another representative, and then that person would technically fall into that subcommittee role for the remainder of this year.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And then at the end of this year, it's 2-year terms, so all subcommittee positions will need to be reappointed, and Mr. McConnell would roll on as the municipal rep starting in 2027 for North Charleston.
Great, okay. All right, perfect. So I think we're resolved there for the moment. Moving forward, we'll have to have a set meeting schedule, at least in print. We can adjust it as needed based on availability, but we do need to put forth a schedule. So I'm just stating that up front. That's what that adoption of a 2026 meeting schedule means.
Is that something staff will pull together?
Eric, that's correct. You and I, or Chris, or with Chris, we'll come up with a possible schedule and just put it out there, right?
You can't see that.
Oh, there it is right there.
Are those on? Okay. So this is the proposed schedule. Of course, we can, the chairman can amend that, add extra meetings, or if there are no agenda items that need consideration, cancel those meetings as well. But we do need to post a schedule for each year.
Well, there it is.
That's not to vote on, or we just adopt it?
We vote on it? Okay. Can we get a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. The motion carries. So that is our schedule for now. We can adjust it as needed. So now, Eric, it's good to have you back in this role. We'll kick it over to you for the program update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The stats that I'm going to give you here were last provided back at your last meeting on October 8th, so they largely reflect the projects that went through and were approved last cycle. So 244 total projects have been approved by County Council. You can see the breakdown there between the different types, as well as urban and rural. And just as a reminder, the graph you see over on the right, that came directly from our website. So all this information is on there. Total acres protected, almost 28,000 acres protected by Greenbelt funds. And of course, many more of those are conservation easement acres than fee simple, and many more in the rural area compared to the urban area. Total funds awarded, $174.6 million, with most of that going to fee simple, a small portion to conservation easements, minor improvements and corridors, and more in the rural area than the urban. Average cost per acre is just over $5,700. And as we know, conservation easements are always lower because you're only purchasing an interest in the property, not the property completely. This has generated $243.7 million in match, or 139%. And usually the main sources of match are the applicant's own financing, other grants, and is often the case seller donations of property values. Property value. 42% of all Greenbelt funded acres, or 12,766, have either current or planned public access, and 185.6 million, or 88% of those funds, have gone towards those same projects. Our minority lands funding is $64.4 million, with 4,233 acres protected. Funding status, this is the big picture look. So lifetime, $154.8 million projected balance, with $18.3 million currently available cash on hand. And you can see those breakdowns between rural and urban. And this does represent the remaining funds for both the first and second half pennies. And of course, our urban allocations are further broken down into sub-allocations based on population. We still have the urban unincorporated in the negative, as well as Folly Beach. And then lifetime projected balances for each sub-allocation are posted there. And those are all in the positive, I'm happy to say. Since your last meeting, we've had these eight projects close. We always get a rush right at the end of the year. And counting the 11 Mount Pleasant Way segments, there are 18 projects still pending closing. We just closed our winter application cycle last month. We have site visits scheduled for next week. You should have received some information on that from Chris. Chris would be here today, but he's participating in our internal county leadership program, which meets every second Wednesday of the month, so he was unable to attend. Subcommittee meeting for these projects will be March 11th, and then the GAB meeting on April 8th. And then we anticipate it. Those recommendations will go to County Council's Finance Committee on April 23rd and County Council on April 28th, of course. Those are anticipated, and the chairman will approve those agendas closer to those dates. Then our next cycle, summer FY27 cycle, opens on June 1st, and those applications will be due no later than July 31st. Happy to answer any questions on the regular update. And if there are none, I'll go ahead and move right into just updating you on the projects that went through last cycle. All 10 of those were approved as recommended. Council did express some concerns that several projects seemed rushed and incomplete. I think there was some discussion about appraisals, whether those are required or not. Those are not required until closing under our current rules. And then there were so all of our projects with no public access planned last cycle passed, I believe, by a 5-4 vote. And there was a good bit of discussion over public access. Any questions? I'll go ahead and move on, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to introduce Tom Austin from Edisto Island Open Land Trust. There is a request to transfer the Salt Landing conservation easement from one land trust to another, and he'll give you the details on that. Tom?
All right. Thank y'all. Initially, I just want to give a disclaimer. I'm presenting this presentation on behalf of Samantha McCann for the Nature Conservancy. In the interest of not kicking this can further on down the road, she had an unavoidable conflict today, so I'm bringing this presentation to y'all on behalf of the Nature Conservancy. So I do want to apologize in advance because there may be some more technical questions that I'm not able to answer directly as the assignee of this transfer request, but I will give you the best information that I have available with me today and how I understand it. But this is a conservation easement that was purchased back in 2007 with a combination of Greenbelt funding and South Carolina Conservation Bank funding. And it's about 550 acres in between the South Edisto River, Raccoon Island Road, and Laurel Hill Road on Edisto Island. And it has been under conservation easement without any significant issues since 2018. However, there have been some changes in ownership and some changes in the kind of overall stewardship of the property since its recording in 2007. In 2010, the Nature Conservancy used this as match for a North American Wetland Conservation Act grant through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so the easement has been further bound by the grant agreement terms of that NACA grant as of 2014. So there is now a third layer of grant restrictions on top of this easement. And then in 2017, the property was subdivided into a northern and a southern tract. It was split, I believe, 330 acres on the north and 220 acres on the south along the boundary of an existing saltwater impoundment on the property, so just a natural property line dividing the land in two. In 2017, the northern tract was bought by Batson Hewitt, And in 2022, the southern tract was bought by Buzz Morris, so the original conservation easement donor has moved on and is now owned by a second generation of landowners. Additionally, right now, Charleston County Public Works is going, I believe, through condemnation proceedings to acquire a 30-foot right-of-way along Raccoon Island Road for a recent improvement to Raccoon Island Road. And so we're currently waiting on that amendment and that condemnation from Charleston County Public Works to go through before we can move forward with this amendment request. Overall, it's about a 0.6 acre drainage easement. Nature Conservancy reviewed it. I've reviewed the easement. The actual use of that portion of the property for that road improvement is not prohibited, but the dedication of a right-of-way is not permissible through the conservation easement. However, there are condemnation clauses within that for a public use like this, so Public Works is going through the condemnation proceedings. Nature Conservancy and the landowner Buzz Morris are working with Public Works to get that sorted out and resolved, but just know that this happened in the middle of us going through negotiations for the assignment. So we've had to back off of this for a year, and we're now bringing it back forward in front of y'all. I believe we were going to present this in spring of last year, and then we had to stop and wait for a year. But that's moving forward smoothly, I believe. And that brings us today to this assignment request. So in recent years, the Nature Conservancy has been interested in transferring conservation easements to local partners throughout South Carolina when it makes sense for that land trust to take over stewardship and holding of that conservation easement, and when it is something that is desired by the landowner to help further their stewardship and management goals, as well as it's a benefit to that partner land trust with them having a particular focus or interest in a specific area or with a specific property. My organization, of course, being the Edisto Island Open Land Trust, we have a keen interest in helping steward and manage and just further promote conservation and good management on Edisto Island. So this is an instance where Buzz Morris, the newest landowner of the southern tract, is interested in placing additional conservation restrictions on his property, as well as doing some wetland and habitat restoration on the site. That is just not, it's something that requires a lot of intensive care and stewardship work, and it's something that the Nature Conservancy doesn't currently have the capacity to provide that landowner, but us as a local land trust interested in promoting those types of things on Edisto, we're in a better position to help work with Buzz Morris to get that conservation in place on the property. So Buzz initiated this transfer request. The Nature Conservancy consented to bring that to us. We have done our initial staff and committee level review, and we're willing to accept this easement once this right-of-way amendment is resolved and we have satisfactory title work and due diligence and get final approval from our board. And additionally, Batson Hewitt, the other landowner in this easement, has also consented to the transfer. And this is also not a new thing. The Nature Conservancy has transferred 2 conservation easements to us, one in 2020 and one in 2021, which had a similar situation where the landowners wanted to do more intensive habitat stewardship work, but it was something that just they didn't have the staff capacity to really be able to provide that fine-scale input and decision-making and back and forth that the landowner needed to be able to implement that stuff in a reasonable amount of time. And so it became beneficial for my organization to be able to take over the stewardship so that we can help that landowner do that management. And it became advantageous to the Nature Conservancy because they were able to then direct their staff capacity elsewhere rather than committing it towards one easement in one part of the entire state that they work in. So it's a partnership towards getting better on-the-ground conservation and management in place. And we're hoping that we can help step in here and make this a net positive for this property and for the conservation values in place. And that's really all I have on it. I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. But that is.
Yes, Andrew. So it sounds like to me, you said the landowners are those who want to do this work. Are they funding the restoration work?
Yes.
Okay, so the landowners.
Yeah. They're funding it themselves and through other mechanisms. It's all outside of Greenbelt and the other funding sources.
I didn't think you were asking for money. So it sounds like to me that you're just a little bit more nimble than the Nature Conservancy when it comes to boots on the ground, so you can actually use those funds to do more than the Nature Conservancy have the ability just by staff?
Well, it's more so by just the rapidity that we're able to do it, because I'm 15 minutes away from the property and the landowner can call me and say, I have a question about something. I can be there in 15 minutes, have it answered, and be out. With Nature Conservancy, they have stewardship staff that are centrally located, so it might be 3 weeks out before they can get someone out there, and then it has to go up to potentially global Nature Conservancy to get a decision. So what takes me 2 hours to make a decision on my end might take the Nature Conservancy 6 months. So it's just a matter of helping facilitate and removing as many impediments as possible so that the good work can be done on the ground. And
Yeah,
we're just
sounds
happy
great.
to help.
Thanks. Yeah.
And so there are really no financial elements to this at all. It's
No.
just purely a change of stewardship or
Yes.
care of the easement. Okay.
Yeah, and also just highlighting the fact that Public Works is going through that condemnation process, so that's an additional layer of complexity we were not anticipating on this.
Right.
but-
Okay.
So our main request is, I believe the requirements of the grant agreement require any transfer of the amendment be approved by GAB. So,
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on this property?
I've got one. Tom, I heard you say, I could have misheard because my ears aren't as good as they used to be, but by having a local land trust, now having the stewardship of this property, could that lead to adjacent property owners, because you're local, being more open to having their properties also included?
yes, in general, except in this case, every property around it's already kind of protected, so. But it does have advantages to us because we're able to, be more in touch with the landowners actually on Edisto Island and help kind of larger scale conservation.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts here? Perhaps a motion?
I'll
Go ahead.
make a motion to approve the transfer of the easement request as stated.
Okay, we have a motion from Andrew, a second from Alvin. If there's not any more discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. The motion carries. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is an update on our work to make some recommendations to you all on amending Greenbelt goals. So I did want to start with just a very brief history of how the original goal was set. That was set by the Greenbelt Comprehensive Plan, where the overall goal was to protect 30% of open space in Charleston County. By their calculations, that would be 200,000 acres. And at the time, that meant that 40,000 more acres needed to be protected to reach that goal. Now, we met the overall goal shortly after 2017, and this is our current goal tracking table. The one thing you'll see is that a couple of those sub-goals, while the overall goal has been met, a couple of those urban lands and corridors have not yet been accomplished. But at your direction to staff, we kind of started with soliciting goals feedback with a questionnaire from our partner groups. And I think that GIS working on LOS modeling is a typo that didn't get removed from the last meeting. But this initial feedback kind of guided you all in what you wanted us to focus on. And you also asked us to form a technical advisory committee with a cross-section of our partners, including municipal reps, the land trusts, and very heavy on the GIS staff. Here's some of the feedback that we got from that initial questionnaire from our partners, and you'll see in just a little bit that there's a through line between most of these recommendations and kind of the work we've done to date. So I'll just read those real quick. Resilient lands, corridors and interconnectivity, which often would require multi-jurisdictional coordination, protecting threatened and disenfranchised communities, working lands, which are our farmlands mostly, more parks and more access to public green space in general. And some of our partners mentioned the Trust for Public Lands Park Serve modeling, which is that 10-minute walk to a park analysis. Buffering of existing public green spaces and parks was important. Water access, that's almost always our number one bit of feedback that we get from the public. And then utilize new technology such as GIS mapping and new data sets that are available to start targeting more geographically areas for protection. To date, we've completed 4 of 4 green infrastructure planning workshops. That mini report will be out and available soon. We'll forward that to you when we get it. But the big thing that has produced for us is a nice data set that maps all of our habitat cores of 100 acres and larger across the county, and also looks at paths of least resistance to connect those, to start connecting those together. And that's something that we can use, and I'll explain a little more on that in just a minute. We've held 3 technical advisory committee meetings. The most recent one was last month. We're starting to make some good progress. But what we are hoping to get from you all today is just to tell us that, yes, we're heading in the right direction, or provide any feedback of any changes that you might like to see. And then we're going to schedule another meeting with the Technical Advisory Committee to come up with some hard recommendations for your consideration. And then ultimately, you can choose to make those recommendations to County Council. So there's six different areas, and some do overlap to some degree. And what we're trying to get at here is not just X acres for this or that, be a little bit more nuanced in our metrics. So the first one is protect and preserve elements from development. And we talked about a way that could potentially be measured, could be car trips. There are data sets out there that can measure impervious surfaces. So you could potentially look at this as impervious surfaces prevented by green space properties. And then there's also software and data sets that can look at land cover to see how much land has been cleared versus land in its natural state or farmland. Any questions on that one? So some of the sources we'll use to try and determine where we want to prevent areas from development could be based off of that green infrastructure plan. You know, if there's a development that could potentially block a corridor from one of the main corridors to try and connect some of those habitat cores, then that might be a higher priority type project. Yes, sir.
Quick question. So when you're talking land cover, are you using like LiDAR canopy coverage, heat maps?
I had hoped some of our GIS folks that were in the room for our technical advisory committee might be here today, but I don't see any of those folks here.
All right, that's fine.
I don't speak the language, but,
okay.
But that's probably right.
Yeah, so that's a great way, like when you say land cover, I think that is a great way to track what's being preserved in development because of the practices of generally clear cutting for a new development. I just think that is a great way to track it. I've been a part of other studies that have used that to great effect.
One interesting thing with the green infrastructure plan is, was it the sleuth model? Okay, so there's a model. We had multiple departments involved in this process, and planning and zoning was able to essentially provide the folks putting this plan together information on entitlements throughout the county. And based off of that, they worked that into their model to see, here's where certain projects are likely to go. So there are some situations where those might conflict with those habitat cores and those connections out in the rural areas.
Yeah,
so that's something we would want to consider.
And then just one thing to think about. I was part of a study. This was years ago now, so it may not be as relevant, but it was trees to offset water. It's something that the city of Charleston did. And part of that effort was mapping urban canopy coverage, at least within the city. So it could be something that you could add in to the group, or maybe thinking about doing it with the county. But that was a great resource to get like a mapping done. It was through, you get a grant for it to map all of the canopy coverage.
And they've
cool.
They've actually reinstated that program with the city, so it's coming back, or
Oh,
it's
awesome.
back.
And Mount Pleasant's doing it too. Yeah, so you might be able to gather that municipal for even like more granular data in those areas. All right, I'll stop talking.
That's good. So any other questions on number one? So we'll come back with some recommendation, maybe based on one of these metrics or a combination of those. if that sounds good to you all. Okay. The second one is sustainable lands and natural infrastructure. And a lot of times we're talking in the low country about managing stormwater and sea level rise and making corridors for marsh migration as sea level continues to rise. And the green infrastructure mapping also will help with that, as well as a number of other data sets that we've been collecting. I think this one might be a, once you map where those most important sustainable and natural infrastructure areas are, we could come back with a number of acres to protect within those areas. And that would be, based on our GIS mapping work, pulling all these data sets together.
A question on that. So a lot of that will be conservation easement dependent, it seems like, to really bulk up in some of those areas. And I'm just curious what council, like if there was any more detail you could give us on why the conservation easements or the ones that didn't have public access had such slim margin votes.
So we're a member of the South Carolina Land Trust Network, and we now have a subcommittee or a subgroup of all the different local government land protection agencies across the state. And to be honest, that's probably the number one issue that all of our partners struggle with, is that public versus private conservation easement balance, and the thing that their governing bodies struggle with the most. So I think it's common. I think it's really just, our current program does promote conservation easements. It's a key part of the program. I just think there's differing philosophical views among county council about whether Greenbelt funds should be used to fund private conservation easements or not.
Outside of public access, what would make a conservation easement application better, you think, in council's eyes, or is that just too speculative to comment on?
Probably too speculative. I think there's
Yeah.
multiple reasons why some of the members are voting against conservation easements. I don't know details on exactly what those are.
Would it be possible and or beneficial for yourself and maybe Eric to try and get, or maybe like an agenda item on council or something, to be able to have that discussion? Otherwise, I guess you could do like, 2-on-2s separately, but just to understand, because I guess, our job is to reflect, obviously, our own personal goals, but also the goals of the people who appointed us to this. And it sounds like maybe there's a disconnect.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if council wants that presentation right now, but I would encourage you all, if you don't have the contact information for the member that appointed you, I'll provide that to you. And Phil, I think that would be good to develop that relationship with your appointing council member and have those discussions with them. I can tell you over the years, we have certainly in one-on-one meetings tried to explain the benefits of conservation easements beyond just the immediate benefit to the property owner. We know that it helps connect these lands, it helps manage stormwater, keeps taxes down for the local community, that type of thing, protects way of life.
Yeah, Adam.
I think the argument is somewhat like this, that public money is used to protect public land, which should have public access. That's sort of the idea there. I think that sometimes we may not do a great job of adequately putting a public value on what these easements provide. And if we had a model where we could demonstrate that by protecting this 200-acre wetland area provides some quantifiable benefit to the stormwater systems, and you could put a specific sort of public benefit to that for each of these applications, that would probably go a long way to gaining more support from these folks who otherwise a conservation easement that does not allow public access looks like basically a gift to wealthy landowners who do not have necessarily the public's broader interest in mind in the case. I think that's the perception. I'm not saying that's true, but that's the perception by some on council.
Well, that's exactly what I was getting at, and just if there was a way to improve the application to reflect that quantifiable thing that might make the application better received at council level. But Mr. Hay.
This is a decades-old problem. We faced this many, many years ago when easement money was going to people who were perceived to be already wealthy landowners. And the problem is getting worse because the government bodies apparently are less inclined to be educated. And it's simply education. So I think you're onto something. If you could quantify, and if you really start thinking about it, you could probably get some pretty hard numbers on the benefits of easements on traffic, on other public benefits other than just taking the land off the market and giving the landowner money. It isn't new, but my perception is it isn't getting better. So I think you're headed in the right direction. Figure a way to make that easement application demonstrate real hard dollar values that they can't be denied. That's where we have to go, because other than that, you're going to have this dichotomy that exists.
Right. If we want to accomplish a goal, we're going to have to explain it better, basically.
I can touch on that a little bit, just from being in the consulting world. So yes, you can definitely demonstrate real-world dollars and value to that, but I think the problem is it would require a lot of effort to get to something where a professional would feel confident in putting a dollar amount on it. I think expressing general benefits would be a lot easier, and maybe I don't know, Eric, if we would have the ability to rely on staff. For instance, if there's 300 acres or 200 acres, whatever you said, of wetland being preserved, can we ask Mr. Wanamaker to make a statement or something on the application saying, yes, in this area, the conservation of this land would overall help, this basin and the flooding problems, similar with the traffic staff. But I guess to put real world dollars on it, I think you'd be asking a whole lot more effort on the application process. And then are we asking too much from a dollar amount, what you have to spend in order to get to the application? If we're saying, hey, now you have to do a basin-wide stormwater study to prove the benefit, or you have to do a traffic study versus a no-build situation versus if this were developed in the way it could be entitled, I think it's a lot of work. So I would just worry that we don't make it too hard for the applicants.
Right.
That's
of course.
Just
Yeah.
throw that out there.
Just want to understand where the sensitivities lie. That's all. But we can keep going.
Yeah, I think that's really good feedback, and we'll take that back to the advisory committee. And there may be something out there already where you can kind of put values to stormwater retention and things like that. So noted feedback, and we'll try and include that whenever we report back to you on these recommendations.
That's perfect. Thank you. Might just improve the narrative on the application kind of overall. But
Yeah,
we can move on.
To be clear, we do, when we send these projects through council, they get the same project summary that you all get, which does list the benefits of whatever the project is. So we do talk about natural infrastructure and stormwater retention when it's applicable. But yeah, there's a lot of info on that sheet. All right, number 3, connectivity / corridors between Greenbelt cores. Again, building off of that green infrastructure plan, and really kind of related to the one right above it as well. 2 and 3 are closely related, but we could map out what these corridors are between the Greenbelt cores, and then set an acreage goal within those corridor areas.
Question? Question?
Yes.
Is this it? Are these the 3?
There's 3 more.
Oh, okay. Well, then you might answer my question.
Okay.
Because what I'm
All right.
seeing, maybe it's going to show up next, but what I'm seeing missing is parks.
Yep.
Okay.
public access is our next one. And what we have talked about here is kind of building off of that 10-minute walk analysis that Trust for Public Land does. Maybe we utilize that in the urban area. Our GIS department has already started developing a model for drive time. That's something that Berkeley County uses when they kind of look at level of service to public green spaces. So what we could do is set a goal of something like X percent of residents, which maybe that's 100% of residents are within a 15-minute drive of at least one public green space in the rural area. And we can kind of adjust that drive time back and forth to see what that number should be. But one thing we learned in doing our inventory of public green spaces throughout the county is that there are a lot of green spaces that are planned for future public access, but they're not open yet. So if you use those in our modeling, the level of service goes way up across the county. So just kind of wanted to note that maybe part of this goal is we want to open a certain amount of green spaces that are already preserved. Now, Greenbelt's a little bit limited in how we can do that. One thing we could potentially do, and Mr. McConnell has mentioned this to me before, is potentially look at allowing minor improvements to be awarded to a project that was funded by Greenbelt in the past, but they didn't request any money for minor improvements. Because what we're seeing is a lot of these organizations don't realize the costs involved in developing public access to a green space and then safely maintaining that access. And 90% of the time we hear, well, just see if Charleston County Parks and Rec will take it. They're in the same situation. They have thousands of acres across the county that they're holding in reserve to open that to the public as demand increases. But they're really stretched thin on their ability to build new parks and operate them as well. So maybe that is a recommendation that could come out of this if this is a goal that you all want us to pursue. Maybe, once we do our analysis, the initial goal is to get all residents within a certain distance from a green space. And once that goal is met, you could double it and say, all right, now we want to make it 2. We want every resident to be within a 10-minute drive of 2 different types of green space. So I think that's a good one that we could easily amend going forward. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question on the minor improvement funds. Do you think you'd be able to limit it to you can only apply for it if it's directly related to allowing public access?
That's how our ordinance defines it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basic public access.
Okay.
So unpaved roads, trails, parking areas, boardwalks, and footbridges. Those are the 5 things that minor improvements are allowed to fund under the ordinance. And then we were kind of thinking the same thing for trails. And, it's just kind of the same methodology, but just to be able to go out and walk on a trail somewhere. With the way that we haven't gotten to this yet, but with the transportation sales tax effort that's going on now, it appears that there could be a separate bike and pedestrian allocation. And that would be able to fund your more traditional on-street type of trails or multi-use paths, your on-street bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So in this scenario, we're talking more about a trail that's not necessarily just a sidewalk on the side of the road.
Yes, sorry, Barbara.
I see a X-minute walk or drive. What about people who don't have cars, who are dependent on public transportation?
We can't put one in every single neighborhood. We can't do a green space in every single neighborhood, but I understand the point.
People without cars should have some kind of access to green space.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a CARTA thing.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Carter thing.
Or I would hope they would, hopefully, the idea is they would fall into the walk category, depending on where this is.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, the walking category would be for a more urban area where you're more likely to have parks within walking distance, hopefully.
And that's what we've discussed in the committee is a walking metric for the more urbanized areas, and then maybe some of your kind of satellite towns like Hollywood, Meggett, Ravenel area. You could probably do a walking score there as well. But for the rural areas, it's just not feasible to have every rural resident within a 10-minute walk to a park, but maybe a 10-minute drive.
Okay.
Our last one is water access, and again, that's always very popular. We're in the low country, there's lots of water, but I would say it's surprising to me the amount of public water access we have compared to some other places around the southeast. Specifically, I don't think a new boat ramp lane has been added since 1993, and I know boat registrations have increased by some exponential number down here. So maybe there's two metrics for this, one for ramp lanes added in the county and then one for paddle access points added. So you could have, what's the most recent one? Willow Oak and what's the project right next to that where we know there is a canoe and kayak access going in Johns Island. Anyway, there's some recently approved properties that have planned canoe and kayak access points. So we would probably want to work with PRC, since they manage a lot of those already, to come up with a plan on how many different points we need, access points, or if there's gaps geographically that we need to target.
Yeah, I was going to ask for that last one. I'm just curious how the group didn't get to the same kind of metric as the public access and the trails, as far as, within, obviously probably walking, not necessary, but, within a certain drive of a paddle access. I'm just curious.
Yeah,
why
we
you didn't get there.
We can look at that as well. Yeah.
Well, okay, then similarly to Barbara's point, it seems like if there was an easy way to reflect at least some bus stop access, I mean, that would improve the narrative on public access if there was some relationship from bus stop to at least some green space.
Well,
but maybe that's...
So in GIS, you can bring in the Carter routes and have that as another data set and, analyze via that.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it's distance or walking distance from a bus stop.
Right. Just proximity to bus stops.
Yeah.
Basically.
It's a good idea.
Hypothetically, after you're done, you could share that with CARTA and see if they want to do anything about it.
That'd be a good narrative for them,
Yeah.
for sure. Anything else on these? Anything else from you on that, Eric?
We've heard your feedback so far. If there's no other feedback, or there's, is there a category we're missing? If not, we'll schedule another meeting with our group and hopefully come back to you all in April at your scheduled April meeting with some recommendations.
What do y'all think? This is our chance to chime in here on this, Adam.
Thank you. Greenbelt's a great program, and it sort of has, the way I see it, has two goals. One is to sort of manage the growth in the urban or in the rural areas, provide these water quality, wildlife habitat, conservation spaces, and also to provide access to people in a way that's managing growth too. If we're going to continue to grow as a region and eliminate the growth from certain areas of the county, we need to accommodate that in other areas of the county in the more urban areas. In order to make those places remain livable, we need to create great public spaces, and we need resources to do that. And so when I look at parks, Charleston County Parks and Recreation Commission recently had a project where they got into a partnership with a boat manufacturer because they couldn't afford to develop a park. The land was given to them. And in the process of doing that, 3 of the council members in North Charleston ended up being indicted by the FBI because of improprieties in that. But that's the level of desperation there is to try to get investment in the actual infrastructure you need to open these spaces to the public. And that's why the city of North Charleston would urge that as we move forward, at least in the urban areas, that there's a larger allocation or an opportunity to provide public access through the Greenbelt Fund, because we're not going to be able to maintain a livable place for everybody if we urbanize and don't provide respite in nature to do so. So I just want to make that statement for the record.
That's good.
Just so, not away from the mic. Are you saying an allocation for improvements, or are you saying just a larger allocation to purchase land?
The ability to go back and make minor improvements to lands that were already protected in the Greenbelt funds prior to that being an option.
Right.
We have hundreds of acres that did not have the option to use these funds for minor improvements. We would like to be able to see that small change so that we can open up these green spaces to the transportation and transit systems that we discussed, to neighborhoods, up and down the corridors. And I will say, too, that the city of North Charleston is getting very serious about how we approach this. Some of the data that's coming from the Greenbelt program, we're very grateful for, looking at these wildlife corridor connections and some of these other benefits that we haven't historically been thinking about strongly. I think we're about to get real serious about that as well. So I think we're going to do both, but we need some flexibility in how we can allocate some of those resources long term.
Comments?
Yeah. Can I just ask, before you say it, I'd be curious if you have any history of the sentiment of council or maybe this board in the past to allow or not allow for this, if there is any history of like whether this discussion's happened before.
No.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
It's very limited, though. Like, because you and I've talked about
Yes.
this before, too.
Yes.
You know, the amount that could be used for actual construction, is there a percentage, a value percentage or something along those lines?
There's not. Our ordinance reads a relatively small portion of of funds awarded for land acquisition may be used for minor improvements. And then it defines those 5 things. We did reach out to Department of Revenue, just ask the question, could we use a portion of these funds to build things like restrooms or playgrounds or some of your more traditional park amenities? And they said, no, you may not. You can do that under the capital project sales tax, which is a completely different structure from the transportation sales tax.
Yes.
One thing we might consider as you go down the road when you're looking at the water access side of the picture, not just using water access for providing more launching sites, but using your water access to access other green space. Mm-hmm. Not driving to it, but going to it by water.
Okay.
Because some of that may be more convenient to the public than getting in their car and driving. I mean, I know some places where I live right now, I can see them, but to drive, it might take me 40 minutes. But I can get in a boat and be there in 15. So we might look at expanding water access as we move forward with another category.
Okay.
Having green space or those properties accessed by water.
And,
makes sense.
Yeah.
And conversely, folks on land can access the water from the land side. So really access for folks to walk along the water or fish along the water, but to be able to get there by land or boat. Yeah.
And ample paddle access, even if a ramp is not available, just because a kayak or paddleboard is so much more accessible to so many more people. Mm-hmm. I'm sure we're already addressing that, but
Okay.
What else? Any other comments? No? Okay. What else, Eric?
I did just want to offer the opportunity. We've got several members here from our technical advisory committee. Did I miss anything that you all wanted to add briefly to the work we've been doing? Are any outstanding questions after this discussion before we reconvene? No? Good? Okay.
Maybe one more.
Andrew.
One more point, just because I think it's such a hot topic, and I think you touched on a little bit with number 2, sustainable lands and natural infrastructure, but the ability to have like floodable assets and floodable spaces is really, really great. And those areas, if depending on where it is and if set up right, can still very much have tons of public access. It's just, during a major rain event, they're not accessible, which you probably wouldn't want to be outside anyway. But that can be such a boon for a community or like a small community for localized flooding issues. And then obviously on a larger scale for larger ones. But I think that should be weighted and encouraged strongly by our group.
Okay.
Okay. I guess that's it from that one.
I've got what we need. If that's the feedback, we'll take it into consideration and bring you something back in a couple months.
Great. Thank you.
Transportation sales tax update. As you all know, County Council has directed staff to start exploring a potential transportation sales tax for this November. We have held, I believe, since late September, over 60 meetings with our municipalities, general public, stakeholder groups during that time. And we had a survey out. So all of that information was gathered back up until early January and presented to County Council's Transportation Sales Tax Committee back on January 13th. And then most recently, on February 4th, we had a workshop with County Council to kind of lay out the staff recommendation for a potential sales tax program, which here's how we think the pie should be split up based on the information we've received back from our municipal partners, our public, our stakeholder groups. That initially, the staff recommendation for that was 20% for Greenbelt. And since then, County Council has made some decisions on that. But going forward, let me just jump ahead a little bit and come back to the schedule. That will make more sense. So just last night, County Council approved a motion for directing staff and the consultants to go back out to the public over the next 30 days and get their feedback on this current plan, which reduces Greenbelt to 15% of the total pie. But that is about $650 million in dollars. Then you can see the breakdown there between infrastructure, public transit, and a new separate category that I mentioned earlier for bike and pedestrian improvements. So what that would mean is if you back out 1.5%, which we typically hold in reserve for admin and operating costs, that would mean $628 million for projects in the program. And if they decided to continue with the 50-50 urban split, that would mean about $314 million to each area, the urban area and the rural area. And if we continue to divvy out funds based on percentage of population inside of the urban growth boundary, you can see over to the right what that would mean for each allocation, with City of Charleston being the largest at about $112 million, Mount Pleasant, $76 million, North Charleston, $73 million, and then coming up in fourth place would be the urban unincorporated area, which is $29 million. Now, if you want to watch the meeting from last night, you'll hear some of the discussion that council had potentially about changing the allocation formula a bit, which might mean more to rural, less to urban, or even vice versa. What's that? Oh, a phone ringing. Got it. So we've looked at those scenarios, but what they had asked us to go out and get public feedback on essentially is this 15%, and we're just projecting it out under the 50-50 urban-rural right now.
Eric, can I ask a quick question? Just on the urban unincorporated, just for people who have been on this board not longer than I have for sure, but that's been the shortest funded, the least funded, and it seemed to be like the greatest need since the time I've been on here is the urban unincorporated.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the least funded. It's just that the funds were spent.
Yes, it was needed
quicker
the most, used the
in that
most.
one.
Yes,
Yes.
So
that one, if you go back to our regular update, I believe urban unincorporated still, what was it, 6 or 7 million in the negative.
Right. Yeah.
You know, lifetime, there's about 1 million remaining in that pot, and that 1 million won't be available until towards the end of the second sales tax, which is 2043. And there was some discussion at council last night about potentially increasing funds for the urban unincorporated area above and beyond what the population formula would provide.
What was the population?
That would make sense. Negative since I've been on the board.
Right. With a lot of people asking. Yeah, Adam.
I just want to state for the record, to advocate for my city, is that the city of North Charleston, although we only have 23% of the people in Charleston County, we generate about 33% of all tax revenues, sales tax revenues. And so I just want to throw that out there for the record, because as we look at these allocations, we tend to distribute things equally based on population, but it may not be equitably based upon the contributions. The return on investment for the city of North Charleston is less than you would expect with considering what we contribute to the fund. That's all I just want to say that for the record.
So I'll jump back to schedule. Obviously, we're in February and just starting that 30-day public feedback period on the draft plan as it currently is. We'll come back in March and report back to County Council on that feedback. I'm sorry, in April. In April, they'll get the feedback on public input and make their final changes to the pie or specific projects that they would like to fund. And if they decide to move forward, then they would finalize that in May and hold first reading of the ordinance to put that on the ballot in November. It requires 3 readings, so under the current schedule, that third reading would happen in late June. In July, we'd prepare the package for submission to the South Carolina Election Commission and make sure all of that is submitted prior to August 17th, which is the last day to submit November ballot items to the commission. And of course, November 4th would be election day. Lastly, I'll just remind everyone that charlestontransportation.com has lots of resources on what's been accomplished to date. That's where you can go to provide feedback during this 30-day period. You can, there's an email address on there that you can send comments to. You can also request a meeting if you'd like us to come to a specific organization or neighborhood group or something like that. You can request a meeting there. And of course, we will continue to send you all email updates. If there's another questionnaire or survey available during the 30-day period, we'll provide that to you. Any other questions on the transportation sales tax? All right. Our last agenda item is we'd like to clean up, with your consent, some of our GAB rules and procedures. And really, the first one we've already discussed is that now that we are posting an annual schedule at the beginning of the year, we wanted to change the rules to say that we will meet at least once each quarter instead of once each month, since that has traditionally been about the frequency of our meetings. And this slide shows the text changes to that portion of the rules and procedures. The other major change is in the past, if a project were deferred by the subcommittee or the GAB, it had to go back to the subcommittee to make another recommendation once the deferral terms were met, and then it had to go back to the GAB. Well, y'all will remember last cycle, we had a project, I believe it was the Polk Flynn Conservation Easement, where we had to have because of the rules, we had to call a special subcommittee meeting right before the GAB meeting, and all of you were already up there. So staff would recommend when a project gets deferred that it does not need to go back to the subcommittee. It will just be considered by the full GAB once the terms of the deferral are met and they're ready to present again. And that's what these text changes clear up in the rules and procedures.
And we'll need to vote on this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Andrew.
Just quick clarification, because I think you said it's deferred by either the subcommittee or full GAB. It doesn't have to go back to the subcommittee? So,
Correct.
So if the subcommittee defers it, they don't have to go back to the subcommittee, they go straight back to the full GAB?
The recommendation for deferral will go to the GAB, and then the GAB,
right.
yeah, and then the
Got it.
GAB can either accept that recommendation, and if they do, then they will come back to the full GAB rather than going back to the subcommittee and then back to the GAB.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to
Yeah.
understand it. I think it makes sense.
Okay.
Did I explain that accurately, Mr. Bell?
That is my understanding of what the intent is. But I believe we've just seen where, an application will come into the subcommittee and they will say, hey, we would recommend deferral to gather more information. And then once that goes to GAB, the full GAB, has that recommendation. And obviously, as Mr. Davis said, can make any recommendation they want. But if they do recommend deferral, a lot of times, the information is already known and the full GAB wants to see it. So staff has found it almost redundant to make it go back to a subcommittee when the GAB already knows what it wants to see. And the applicant is already saying, hey, here's what you wanted to see. Here it is.
I fully agree.
Yeah, okay.
That we covered that.
If everybody's good and understands this, could we perhaps have a motion for approval?
For the record, this is more for informational purposes. Per the GAB rules, any rule changes are presented to GAB, but they will be voted on at a subsequent meeting.
Oh, no. We got to vote on it later.
Yes.
Okay, we got to process this.
Unless there is any changes or critiques that you have of it, you guys will be voting to adopt these rules at your next meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. So y'all have some time to think about this one.
Is there one more?
And please do not delay any thoughts, because if there are changes, then obviously those changes would be presented at a next meeting, and that would just further delay actual adoption of rules.
Got it.
So
we can't change during. Yeah.
So that'll come back in April.
Yes. All right, everybody seems good with that. Okay.
Was there one more edit, or was that the same edit?
There's 3 total edits. The first is related to the meetings, and then the next 2, one changes some of the language under the subcommittee procedure, and then the other one changes the language under the full the GAB procedure. But they're related, so we needed to change both. So just a reminder, our next scheduled meeting is the subcommittee meeting on March 11th. Our GAB meeting will be April 8th, and we are having site visits next week. If you'd like to attend any of those and have any questions about it, please reach out.
Will you publish the locations and the times?
I'll have Chris send out, he's got all that.
Okay,
I'll send
that'd be
details
good.
out to you.
That'd be good. Okay. So Eric, are you good?
Yep.
Covered everything?
That's all I
Okay. And everybody sees the next scheduled meeting of April 8th. Does anybody else have any other business they'd like to discuss? No? Okay. Then we're adjourned. Thank you.